Coming up on the Conservationists Assemble, we'll be telling the story of the Large Heath Butterfly, a species that had previously been considered extinct in the Greater Manchester area, but is having a humble yet remarkable recovery through a very dedicated partnership of amazing organisations. You'll learn about a crucial and largely unknown habitat of the UK in its peatlands, synonymous with the Large Heath Butterfly, but when restored to their former glory, are a vital resource for a healthy planet, and will provide you with simple actions like how planting certain species in your garden can have a direct positive impact on the biodiversity in your region, and how going peat-free combined with smarter consumerism can have a positive impact on how businesses are considering their impact on the planet. Welcome, fellow wildlife avengers, to the Conservationists Assemble. My name is Johnny Bloxham, but here I am known as my alter ego, Captain Conservation, your friendly neighbourhood animal advocate. I am a former zookeeper with a passion for conservation education and the global efforts for threatened species and habitats around the world. I am inviting you to join me as we take the fight to our planet's biggest villain and my arch nemesis, extinction. Whether you're new to animal advocacy or a veteran in wildlife preservation, this is the podcast for you. Each week I'll be teaming up with Earth's mightiest wildlife heroes to unify the greatest collaboration of conservationists ever known, where we will be discussing our planet's epic species and what is being done to save them. This is the Conservationists Assemble. Will you join the fight? Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Conservationists Assemble. How have you all been? We've got an exciting episode for you today and we're going to get straight into it. So joining me now are Alan Wright and Jenny Bennion from the Wildlife Trust for Lancashire, Manchester and North Merseyside. Alan, Jenny, welcome to the Conservationists Assemble. Thank you for teaming up with me today. How are you both?
Really good, thank you.
Yeah, doing really well, thanks.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to have you both here, and I'm really excited to get into this conversation through doing research on this species and the project for their reintroduction. I think it's going to be a really awesome conversation. But before we get into the thick of discussing your work and the collective efforts for the Large Heath Butterfly, could you please introduce yourselves in a bit more detail to our listeners?
I'm Alan Wright. I'm the head of communications and campaigns at the Wildlife Trust for Lancashire, Manchester and North Merseyside, the longest title in history. I've been involved with the Wildlife Trust now for the past actually it's about 15 years now. Officially it's 13, but I was involved in a project to start off. So I've been involved with the Wildlife Trust for about 15 years after a background in journalism. And yeah, it's the best job. It's a passion of mine now. Everything we do, and this particular project has been one of the kind of major things we've been able to we tell stories, and this is such a great source of storytelling that the project we're going to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, I'm Jenny. I'm one of the communications officers at we tend to call it Lancashire Wildlife Trust because the name is so extraordinarily but yeah, we do cover the whole of Lancashire, all of Greater Manchester and North Merseyside as well. And this Large Heath Butterfly reintroduction project has been one of my favourite things I've worked on while I've been at the Trust. It actually it all kind of kicked off not long after I started, so it was probably the first big project I got to work on, and it was such a treat. It was just such a brilliant introduction to the fantastic work we get to do being part of the Wildlife Trust.
I love that, and I can see the enthusiasm in both of your faces already, and so yeah, I can really tell that it's going to be a great conversation, and we're really going to unpack everything there is to unpack. But it certainly goes without saying that the presence of butterflies typically goes hand in hand with blue skies and sunshine, which I don't know about you guys, but from my view is very much the opposite of the weather today. So hopefully people will take some solace knowing that is coming, and along with butterflies. But you know, when you're sitting in your garden or in wild spaces and that unmistakable fluttering of a butterfly passing you by just brings an essence of joy. So in terms of the Large Heath Butterfly, how can everyone identify one of these species?
So the Large Heath Butterfly is a specialist of lowland peatlands. So it might not be a habitat that a lot of people are really familiar with. Quite often when you think about peatlands, if you do, I mean, I hope you do, everyone should, they're wonderful. But quite often when you think about peatlands, you might think about our moors, our wonderful wild upland areas that are boggy and squelchy and wonderful. But actually, in the UK, we have a lot of lowland peat as well. Unfortunately, the vast majority of it we've lost to drainage, conversion for agriculture, development, things like that. And along with it, obviously, a lot of the species that live on them. In our region, we've lost around 98% of our lowland peatlands, which is huge. And the large heath butterfly has been a casualty of that. So they are really sweet. They're really sweet little brown butterflies. They've got little orange splodges on them, which is very cute. But they're only dinky. They're only probably 4 centimeters, 5 centimeters. And yeah, you think about these wonderful sort of tropical butterflies in amazing colours, and that's not the large heath. But they're so charming. They're such lovely little things. And we're all completely obsessed with them. But yeah, they live on our lowland peatlands. You do get them on the uplands as well. And they are a real indicator species. So to have a lovely, healthy population of large heath butterflies, you need to have that habitat in a good enough condition to be able to support them. And so that's where the large heath has been so important for us, because it's really been able to show how these habitats are faring.
I think we need to kind of get a little bit of context into the history of the large heath as well, in the fact that I mean, certainly the area we work in between Liverpool and Manchester was a bog. It was a huge bog. I mean, Liverpool was almost an island. And obviously, you've got the railway line that actually floats on top of that bog, which was the first passenger railway in the UK, in the world, sorry, between Manchester and Liverpool. So that area was just a huge bog, a huge area of peatland, which obviously over the years has been developed. There's been farming introduced farming practices, which kind of farmers obviously prefer a drier land than the wetland that these butterflies like. So in those days, 150 years ago, there were basically thousands and thousands of these large heath butterflies flying. Now, if you then look at that and think that until 2019, when we had the first reintroduction, there were no butterflies for about 150 years on that land. So they'd gone from thousands and thousands to nothing at all because of the way the land was managed. So now, it's actually a big point of this story is that when there were a lot of butterflies in the Manchester area, that butterfly locally was known as the Manchester Argus. Mm-hmm. So again, there's a lovely historical background to this, and obviously those butterflies will have been seen by a lot more people who were wandering about on the mosses in those days. But it's not the kind of place you really want to wander without a torch at night, because you'll end up sinking. So there is this context of while they disappeared from Manchester and the Liverpool area, we still have them in Lancashire.
Jenny, you mentioned that they're quite a specialist species. Is what defines that? Is it because of the type of habitat they're in, and what specifically allows them to cope with that habitat that maybe other species can't cope with?
Yeah. So what you'll find with a lot of our invertebrate species, especially with kind of butterflies and moths, is that actually they have all evolved alongside certain plants, certain other plant species, so that would either be their food or a nectar source. And the large heath butterfly is a specialist of the plants that you'll find on lowland peatlands. So the two they really, really need The first is a type of cotton grass called hare's tail cotton grass. You only get this growing on peatlands, and it's not actually, it's a grass, it's a sedge, but yeah, looks like a grass. And in sort of early summer, late spring, it gets these beautiful white, fluffy seed heads. They look like little balls of cotton wool, and they'll kind of turn peatlands almost white. It looks like they've been dusted in icing sugar. It's extremely beautiful.
I really recommend a visit this when that's happening. It's like a carpet of white fluff. It's
It
beautiful.
is so beautiful. But hare's tail cottongrass specifically is the food plant of the Large Heath caterpillars. And it forms these kind of little tussocks, little humps, and that's where the caterpillars overwinter as well. And then the other plant that your large heath butterflies really need is a type of heather called cross-leaved heath, and that's their main nectar source. So you need the hare's tail cottongrass for the caterpillars, and then you need cross-leaved heath for the adult butterflies once they've emerged. And those two plants are specialist found on our peatlands, and so that's how the kind of large heath has evolved to be that specialist of that area. You'll find it with lots of other sort of species and butterflies as well. But yeah, that's specifically why large heath are so married to those peatland habitats.
And I'm glad you brought up kind of recommending visiting, Alan, because one of my questions a bit later on was going to be, in the kind of right time of year, are people able to visit the peatlands to come and potentially see large heath butterfly when they are out and about?
Yeah, part of the work we do on the mosses is to create footpaths around some of these boggy areas. I mean, as I say, you don't really want to be walking through the boggy areas, and we don't want people to be walking through the boggy areas. So we are creating paths around. I mean, the areas where these bogs is pretty much very close to huge conurbations like Manchester and Wigan and Warrington. So we do get a lot of footfall from people taking dogs for walks, walking around there. So you can actually walk up by the side of say Astley Moss and look across at this field of absolute white cotton grass in spring. And if you're lucky, I mean, you might see a large heath if you're on the edge of the peatlands. So yeah, I mean, they are accessible. They are in areas where we expect quite a lot of footfall, and we do get people, quite a few people going down there and actually working with us and volunteering down there as well.
Yeah, a really good one to visit is Little Walden Moss. That's just in between Culcheth and Earlham. And on three sides of that is a really lovely proper surfaced footpath. You can walk along, you can see right over the peatland there. There aren't any large heath butterfly on Little Walden Moss, but yet we would
watch this space.
Love to get them back in the future. We've no firm plans, but it would be really, really amazing. But yeah, get yourself down there, and as Alan says, sort of late spring, early summer when the cotton grass seed heads are out, it is just beautiful.
Well, that's a good point about potential future plans, or just potential for where we could see large heath butterflies returning to in the future, because they are found in mainland Europe, and their story is pretty similar in terms of perhaps Hungary or Slovenia, where they're thought to be extinct as well. And we know that also Scotland, Ireland and Wales have little populations as well. But for England, this seems very much to be a northwestern project. So what do you think is there other suitable habitat in the Midlands, or perhaps even further south, that one day we could see large heath butterfly returning to?
Yeah, I think we definitely could. We'd certainly love to see the large heath spreading back, right across this area. There's peatlands, across a lot of the north. Obviously, it's a peatland specialist. It needs to be where peatlands are. But yeah, we've shown that they can be reintroduced. And yeah, let's get them everywhere. They really are just extremely charming. They're really sweet little butterflies. I really love them.
You look at the work we've done already. We initially the large heath that we have are on Windmarley Moss near to Garstang. So in 2016, we actually moved the small population across to Haitian moss, and Haitian moss is notorious for being vandalised and with arsons attacking the place and setting fire to the place. But even from 2016, 8 years ago, we still have large heath butterflies from that initial couple of releases that we had there. It was a lovely day. I remember it really well because we've got a lot of school kids to actually release the butterflies for us, which was fantastic. And then, obviously, from 2019, we've concentrated a little bit on Astley moss at the moment. But as we improve mosses, we do have a large area of peatland. It always amazes me that you stand on a nature reserve and you can't actually see the end of it, and that's little Walden moss and that's Astley moss. But if you at the moment, it's pretty much Astley moss, but we will be moving them as we improve peatlands across that area, and we're in the process. I think I can announce, even though it's not going to be a huge, the big announcement isn't going to be, but we've now got 11 nature reserves in that area, which are going to be which have been designated as a national nature reserve as from last week. The official launch will be in sometime in summer, but those are the designations happened, so we now have other areas we can work on. So eventually, we're hoping that we're looking at hectares and hectares of land where Manchester Argus butterflies can fly, and large heath butterflies can also fly when they're not in Manchester. I have the same problem. I have the same problem as the butterflies because when I go anywhere, I tend to tell people I'm from Wigan. A lot of people haven't heard of that unless they're rugby fans, so I have to say Manchester. So I've got this kind of link to the butterflies.
Who's not heard of Wigan?
And actually, there's a couple of good points there. I suppose, firstly, just to touch on, kind of that disconnect from nature in terms of you say the kind of people setting fire to the heathlands and that disregard for nature is just about getting that connection back. So by having the school kids come in to release butterflies, that's a really fun and novel way of integrating and empowering hopefully not just the younger generation. They'll go home and tell their mums and dads that they have released some butterflies, and you're creating that connect. But also, I suppose, the importance of the peatlands in the sense that actually, even though there's only 2% left, they are a really important habitat because of the benefits they have to the planet. So could you just talk to us about what the peatlands do for us as humans and not just what they do for butterflies?
Yeah, so peatlands are absolute ecological superstars. They are really amazing. Probably the biggest thing they do for us is they are a gigantic carbon store. So in the UK alone, our peatlands store more carbon than the forests of the UK, France, and Germany combined. They are a massive, massive carbon store. And actually, a healthy peatland will continue to sequester carbon. So it literally will suck carbon out of the atmosphere and bury it in the peat as it's forming. Now, the problem at the moment is that so many of our peatlands are damaged that actually, as soon as you damage a peatland, all that carbon gets released. So currently, they're more of a problem than the solution, which they could be. We don't know the exact figure, but we're looking at it's probably around 5% of UK greenhouse gas emissions come from degraded peatlands, which when you think aviation accounts for around 6 or 7%, like that's huge. We aren't going to meet our net zero targets with our peatlands still emitting carbon, but if we restore them or we manage them in more sort of sustainable ways, then we can stop that. And we can stop it really quite quickly, actually. The main thing is just about getting them wet again. And we've seen that with some of our other projects. So carbon is a really huge one. The other really great thing they do is natural flood management. So peatlands are naturally wet, boggy, and they basically act like giant sponges. So as we can see with climate change, we're getting more and more extreme weather events, really heavy rainfall, flood events, and a healthy peatland will literally just sit there like a giant sponge. It will soak up all that rainfall and it will just release it really slowly. Just releases it slowly into the watercourses and helps to just sort of calm everything down and can really help stop flooding. Again, the issue is that most of our peatlands are damaged and dried out. And when they're dried out, the water just hits the top and shoots straight off the peatlands, straight into our watercourses and can really exacerbate flooding. And we're seeing more and more of this. So peatlands can be really, really important for helping to reduce flood risk. They also naturally filter our drinking water. So around 70% of UK drinking water comes from peatland-dominated catchment areas. And again, a healthy peatland will just slowly trickle that water through. And that really helps to kind of filter out all your kind of impurities and nasties, means that our water companies need to do less to be able to get it ready for us to, come out of our taps and have a lovely glass of water from, which then reduces the energy consumption, reduces the chemicals it needs, helps lower our bills. But as I said, currently they're all degraded and actually they're just making it worse. So,
Jenny's an evangelist, have you noticed?
Oh, sorry, I really love peatlands. They're properly amazing. They're just my favourite. I mean, you've made a mistake. You've asked me to talk about them, so I'll be here sometime next week still.
That sounds great. We'll have a little peatland series because you've very recently just returned from a peatland conference in Ireland, if I'm correct.
I did, yeah. We are in the middle, we're just starting a brand new project working with partners in across the UK, Ireland, and in the Netherlands. And that is looking at wetter farming. So, in a nutshell, a lot of our lowland peatlands have been drained, converted to agriculture. Obviously, this is releasing loads of carbon. Also, that land is getting really difficult to farm. It's waterlogged. It's really hard for farmers. So, we're looking at ways of re-wetting that peat, which helps to reduce those carbon emissions, but then looking at different ways to farm and manage that land so that it can still remain in production and financially viable for the farmers. It's all well and good to come along and say, let's just restore everything. But these are people's livelihoods. Mm-hmm. We still need to keep land in production. So we're looking at lots of different ways that we can do that. And we've got quite a few different trials going on across the northwest. We're trialing growing food crops at a higher water table. We tried celery, blueberries, lettuce. We're going to try a couple of new things this year, which is really exciting. We're also growing bulrushes, which may not sound like a part of your regular Sunday roast. But actually the fluffy seed heads that you get at the top of bulrushes, there's a company called Ponder that has developed a process that takes these and turns it into padding, filling for padded jackets, for puffer jackets.
Oh, cool.
And like a sustainable filling. It's really cool. Like,
but it'd be really, really expensive.
Oh. The more it happens, the price will come down. And I want one.
That's a really interesting concept. So kind of a big watch this space.
Really, very much so.
And so in terms of just an ecosystem as a whole, should the large heath butterfly get back to numbers of years gone by, what role would they play in the wider ecosystem? Would we see then perhaps a return of other species? Because you've got birds like lapwings that are equally as vulnerable, and I'm assuming that they might be a prey item for the lapwing. I'm not sure, but would you see more species returning to the peatlands?
Yeah,
It's an interesting point. I mean, just to go back a little bit. Certainly, with some of the plants we've tried to reintroduce, or we have reintroduced, like the sphagnums and the sundews and this kind of thing, we've actually found that as we've disturbed the land to actually create the proper peatland, some of it has just returned naturally. So it is important that we kind of look at this as a whole as well, and look at it's not just about the large heath. It is about that's just a small part of this whole thing. Because we are trying to bring back plants, we are trying to bring back things like dragonflies, but some of them are just coming back naturally, which just proves that this is what it was like. Unfortunately, the large heath couldn't do that, and there was a process to bringing the large heath back to kind of making sure we took a sustainable group from Winmarleigh Moss, took them to Chester Zoo where they pupated, and then to actually release the butterflies then on the moss. So there is a process here as well, but they're all part of this bigger thing. As far as the food source, Jenny's going to have to answer that one.
yeah, so large heath. I've not come across lapwing eating them. They tend to be it's some of the sort of smaller birds, so things like meadow pipits will have a go at them. And yeah, they're a really important food source. It's just that that additional step in the food
Hmm.
chain. Invertebrates are so important for that, and they get really overlooked.
Yeah.
But yeah, we really need them. One of the quite cool things about large heath butterflies is on their wings, they do have little kind of what look like eyes. You get that on quite a lot of butterflies. It's where the Argus part of the Manchester Argus name comes from, because Argus was a Greek god that had loads of eyes or something.
Sure.
Um, and we have got a photo actually of a large heath butterfly that has got part of its wing around where that eye is missing. And that's because probably a meadow pipit or some kind of smaller bird has come down and had a go, but got confused by that
Oh,
eye marking. And so it's had a go at the wing, but has missed the actual body of the butterfly. And so he's managed to flap off and escape, which is kind of cool.
There's the
that's
whole
Yeah, they're
there's
really
the whole pollination thing as well, isn't there? The important pollinators. Butterflies are massively important pollinators. So the large heath is probably pollinating in some of its own food source
yeah.
if that works.
fantastic. And yeah, yeah, you mentioned kind of a nice point of the start of the conservation actions in terms of finding that sustainable population. So for a species that had been extinct in the greater Manchester area in Lancashire for over 100 years, how do you find that sustainable population to start this road to reintroduction?
I think
Um,
that would be the first step. I mean, Winmarleigh Moss is a moss that we've kind of owned for quite a long time, and we are trying to get other parts of that area as well. So it is a process, and we kind of look at the situation, and we look at you know what's there and what's been missing, and yeah, I mean we are always there is a population in Cheshire. Now I'm not sure if we've tapped into that yet, but I think mainly our butterflies have come from Lancashire.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean we have looked around to see if there are any more sustainable populations in the area.
So taking a donor population of butterflies is really closely controlled. So there are really specific guidelines that we have to follow. We have to get specific permissions from Natural England. And actually, for our reintroductions, we were allowed to collect just 6 pregnant female butterflies from the existing population that was sitting on Winmarleigh Moss in North Lancashire. And that is as complicated as you go out onto a peatland, which is boggy and quite difficult, with your butterfly net, and you chase butterflies around.
I remember that day.
It's actually extremely fun, but also really difficult. Thankfully, the Large Heath is, to be fair to it, quite a lazy little butterfly. Especially the females, and especially when they're pregnant, which fair enough. So if you say disturbed one that might have been in a clump of heather, it will just kind of flop up, fly over, and just be like, oh no, I'm knackered, I'm sitting back down. And then you can kind of try and scoop it that way. But yeah, so it's just a case of we go out, we survey, we check that the numbers on that donor population are high enough. We then get our permissions and we collect our 6 pregnant butterflies. They then go into a special transportation container, shoot off down the motorway to Chester Zoo, where the invertebrate team, who are amazing at the zoo, they then have a special little enclosure that we've already taken down loads of those food plants that they really need. So there's cross-leaved heath and there's hare's tail cottongrass ready in their enclosure waiting for them. The butterflies go in, they then lay their eggs, and a bit later on the caterpillars hatch, and they are tiny. I mean, they're like 1 millimeter, absolutely tiny little things. But they eat their cotton grass and they're quite happy. Then they overwinter, they burrow down into the tussocks, and then the following spring, they kind of re-emerge a bit, keep on eating that cotton grass, and then they pupate. And then is the bit where conservation becomes a little bit Blue Peter, which is sort of my favourite. And you just get some canes, and admittedly, I wouldn't want to do this. It's only the specialist invert team at Chester Zoo. But they take the pupa and they glue them onto the canes, little line, and then they are transferred to a transportation container, i.e. old ice cream tub with some holes poked in the end that you just
Don't give everything away.
It's my favourite part about it. I just love it. It works really, really well, and it's sort of
before we move away from Chester Zoo, let's just look at Chester Zoo itself. I mean, Chester Zoo have been an amazing partner in quite a few of the things we've done. But there is an area of the butterfly house in Chester Zoo where you can actually look at these caterpillars.
Oh, fantastic!
So I mean that really adds to that. So yeah, I think that's quite exciting.
Yeah, I haven't been to Chester Zoo for ages, but I studied at Chester Uni and had 3 years membership to the zoo as part of my uni there, so I was there all the time, and so yeah.
Well, I'm going to show off about a member of my family, my niece, who's the giraffe keeper at Chester Zoo. So
fantastic!
I'm hoping to get some free tickets quite a lot.
If you're listening, Alan's niece, hook him up,
Caroline. Yeah.
And yeah, in terms of transport, and I'm there with you, Jenny. I'm a bit too heavy-handed to glue a little pupae to a cane. But yeah, you see pictures of them using paintbrushes to move these cat. Yeah, just a testament to how delicate they really are.
Oh, they really are. Yeah, they're wonderful. And then, once the pupa have arrived on site, we have a special little release enclosure, which is essentially kind of a small tent, but it is a specific one for invertebrate release. And the ice cream tub goes in there, lid off. Again, that's been filled with hare's tail cottongrass and cross-leaved heath and water and things like that. And then it's a case of we go down normally twice a day and check if any butterflies have emerged. And then when they emerge, you unzip your little tent and they fly out. And that's it. That's them reintroduced. And sometimes their laziness is does them detriment because they sort of emerge and they're like, oh, lovely. Everything I need is right here. Right. Well, I'm going to stay right here then. And so you, oh, it's a butterfly and it's amazing. And you unzip and it just sits there and looks at you. It's like, yeah, hi. It's great here. Like, nope, come on. You've got to come out. So you've got to kind of persuade them out a little bit. But then, yeah, they're out and that's it. I mean,
I think being a member of the comms team for the past over 10 years, it's been such a pleasure to be involved in every stage of that. So, as Jenny was saying, we did the transects of Wyn Marley, and then we went and caught well, I'm saying caught. As a comms officer, you don't have to do all the dirty work. You basically just watch and take pictures. So we took a few pictures of people actually doing that.
I remember having to do the dirty work.
And then we went to no, you don't. Then we went to Chester Zoo, and obviously seeing them in Chester Zoo and kind of mixing with the Chester Zoo team was fantastic. And then the actual release, the very first release, which unfortunately fell during COVID, so it kind of affected some of the comms we can put out. But it was, I'm actually getting a cold shiver right down my back at the moment thinking about that release, and it's such a nice feeling to know that some of those butterflies and some of the butterflies were released over the following years are doing so well on the moss. So yeah, it's been a massively successful thing, and it's just been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to have been involved with the teams who've actually done this. And Jenny does get her hands dirty sometimes. I've seen we do videos and she has to do that so she looks good on the videos.
I'm extremely good at falling in ditches.
There's just one question I want to ask. So, if you was to put a butterfly net in my hand now and ask me to go and catch a pregnant female large heath butterfly, I would put money on it that I would get it wrong. If I caught any butterfly, it probably would be a miracle. But how do you identify that it's a female? But then if it's pregnant, is it quite obvious?
To be fair, I can't tell the difference. But thankfully, members of our conservation team can. The amazing staff at Chester Zoo did a whole kind of training thing with them, so that it just kind of involves you catch them, and because they're so delicate, and so you've got to hold them in a very specific way, and then it is just a case of basically just kind of turning them over, and,
sure.
and you can look at the body shape and the shape of the abdomen. As I say, I can't do it, but thankfully we have
we've got bee experts to go out and pick bees up off plants and look at them like that. I wouldn't go near them. There is a speciality to it, and we do have experts who actually deal with that, and they are such a great team. I think if people do want to get involved with this particular butterfly or any kind of conservation like this, it's always a really good step to just try volunteering. I mean, if people are at university or college, then we do have a really, really strong volunteering team down on the mosses where they'll do a lot of work, they'll do a lot of clearance work, they'll do a lot of planting and things like that, but they will be there when the butterflies are released as well. So it's only by becoming involved, either as getting a job in a career in conservation or becoming a volunteer, that you do get really, really close up to some of these things, particularly this sort of butterfly. But saying that, I mean, I spend most of spring trying to get pictures of orange tip butterflies in my garden. I can see them, but they're far too fast for me. I tend to get away with one really blurry one, but it's a similar thing. I mean, you can get involved with a lot of wildlife by actually becoming a volunteer, becoming a recorder, becoming a birder, or whatever. And I think my advice is, if you really want to see these real exceptional wildlife wonders like the Large Heath Manchester August butterfly, you've really got to get involved in what we do.
Yeah, I'll be sure to, because you have the form for the Peatland Practical Volunteer on your website, so I'll be sure to link that in the show notes. If anyone off the back of this feels empowered to connect with this species and this particular project, But yeah, some of the
And
other ways that you can.
we're all really nice people as well. We had we had a video guy who comes out with us quite a lot recently, and basically we introduced him to like his fifth conservation officer, and he said, "Is there anybody horrible who works with you?"
Yeah,
We
yeah,
are very.
definitely. I think animal people or conservation people are just very passionate, and they're at their happiest when they're doing what they love. So yeah, it's hard to find someone involved in conservation on a down day, as much as it's a industry or a job that has its potential to be negative. Everyone still manages to stay upbeat and.
Absolutely. It can be tough, and a lot of the time you are working, you feel like against things, and you go out to sites and you can see all these issues, and you have deal with these terrifying statistics about nature decline, biodiversity loss, you know, the climate emergency. But then we do have these really wonderful projects, the Large Heath Butterfly reintroduction, all our kind of conservation on the ground changes, the lobbying that we do to government, the policy change that we have actually enacted or have supported making these changes. And yeah, you can make a difference, and there is things that we can do. And every now and again you do sometimes just sit and you're like, oh, this is just terrifying. What are we going to do? But we can do things. We
Mhm.
can
There's
make
an
a
appetite. There's
difference.
an appetite for people to talk about conservation because of the good news side of it. And I find that if I'm talking to friends, they're always interested in the job I do and what we've been doing and why we do certain things. And and as I say, I'm a comms officer. I do get my hands dirty. I do go and volunteer sometimes, but my job is to capture the passion that those officers have for the projects and that people who work with them and people who come. So, for instance, we did some. We were on the beach at St Anne's last
Oh,
week,
I love this project.
and we were basically what we do there is we dig holes and bury recycled Christmas trees, so they stick out the ground and then create new sand dunes. And there were about 200 volunteers, and it was the sun was shining. Everybody was in t-shirts. I mean, it was freezing, but everybody was in t-shirts because we were working so hard, kind of burying these Christmas trees. So they'd actually sit and create these new trees. And we've been doing this for about 9 or 10 years now. So it's become part of what's going on down at St Anne's. It was like a rock festival. Everybody was talking to everybody, and everybody was coming over and chatting to us and bringing the dogs over and all the rest of it. We can't do that on the peatlands because there aren't as many people there. There wouldn't be as many people walking past. But I think these schemes capture conservation in the fact that we're doing something that I think is really good for us, really good for wildlife, really good for the planet. And I think people really do appreciate that. So it is good news. I think it is really good news. We're surrounded by bad news, and certain things do affect conservation. But we're going to carry on. We're not going to stop creating good news stories just because there's a little bit of bad news happening somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Alan. And be that whether you're working in the field or in zoos, I think we're at the point where the work internally, the hands-on work surrounding the species or the habitats that we're trying to protect are so fine-tuned and really good that a big part of it is empowering. And so the work of education and comms and all that is just as crucial as the work directly involving the species at the same time.
And this blog too, Johnny. I mean, this blog is going to hopefully empower people to do that.
And it's funny, I'm glad you brought up the Christmas trees because it had gone to the back of my head while I was researching this. But yeah, when you first emailed me saying that, yeah, we can talk more next week, I'm currently on the beach planting Christmas trees to make sand dunes. I don't think I fully appreciated how crazy that sounds. But just walk us through that. How does planting a Christmas tree create a sand dune, and what does the benefit of those sand dunes bring?
So first of all, we recycle the Christmas trees. We get the Christmas trees handed in from all over the place. So we were basically faced with a wall of about 3,000 Christmas trees in the car park where we have them. The Fylde Council and Blackpool Council then get involved. So we get a digger, we'll dig a trench along the beach, and then it's simply a case of sticking the trees in so they're about half deep, and then kind of burying them to make sure that the tide and the wind doesn't push them over. There's always one or two escape. There's always a Christmas tree or two floating around St Anne's in summer. But so what happens is it catches the sand as it's blown, or as the tide comes in, and it catches it, and then they start to create little hillocks. Now, if you go this year, you'll still see last year's trees just about poking out with about yay high, about a foot high, or a few inches high, so out of the sand. But further down, and I think we've created hundreds of meters of new dunes. You'll actually see the difference between the dunes in St Anne's and the dunes further up at Stargate in Blackpool, which look like cliff edges where they've been eroded. Now, those dunes are in danger of collapse. We'll have to look at those in the future. They're in danger of collapse, which would then mean that people's homes behind those dunes will be affected. But we're also invested in that. We've created a nature reserve in St Anne's just behind the dunes as well, where we've recently reintroduced sand lizards. So over the past 4 or 5 years, we've actually reintroduced sand lizards. So that population is doing really well. So they're going to be protected by these new layers of dunes that are being created. So it's a simple idea. You stick a Christmas tree in the ground, leave it sticking up, and the sand catches on it and creates new dunes.
That's so clever. And I suppose then by having those, it provides protection from the elements for, like, say, preventing what's about to happen or what will happen to the ones in Blackpool.
Yeah.
I mean, go on, sorry, Jenny.
I was just going to say, they create this amazing soft sea defense. So whereas in some places you might need to start building giant concrete walls, what we can do is take my old Christmas tree every year goes from my house and gets buried, and its branches catch the sand and they create sand dunes that, as Alan said, they're not only an amazing habitat. There's sand lizards on there now where they become lost, but also it's helping to create that natural sea defense. I think it's around 100 meters more kind of depth of sand dunes than there were 10 years ago now.
I mean, we do some planting as well, do it? We do some planting just to kind of firm the dunes up as well.
In marram grass, things like that, don't you?
Yeah, but also, I mean, in that nature reserve, there's a lot of quite rare plants like Isle of Man cabbage and helleborines and this kind of thing. And it's one of those exciting projects where you can actually stand back and say, I've made a difference. Certainly, if you've been doing it for 9 years, like apparently I've been doing it. This year, I think it was the 11th year this year we were doing it. So it's 11 years we've been doing it. And it's one of those things you go down to every year and you chat to people and kind of spread the conservation message. But it's actually doing some good. I always say that kind of sometimes if you're volunteering or you're involved in wildlife, it's always nice if you can actually see something that you've actually created. So the dunes, for instance, or if you're kind of clearing a field of Himalayan balsam, there's always something there you can actually see. But and obviously on the moss, we're seeing these butterflies still there. We're seeing the cotton grass. So the whole thing is it does make you feel good that we're actually doing something and it's working.
Yeah, 100 meters is gargantuan as well, isn't it? Like, I'm hearing the word 100 meters, but I can imagine it's completely different hearing it to standing there and you're looking up at this natural but also man-made, in a sense, solution.
Yeah, but you can't tell, actually, after a couple of years, you really can't tell where the new dunes are, which is really amazing. And it's another one of those things that, if you think about the time frames, this is 10 years. It's really not that long
No.
to have made such a difference.
I actually, when you mentioned burying your own Christmas tree before, I actually got quite emotional this year. It was kind of Christmas is finally over. The first week in February.
Love it. I love taking the Christmas tree off to
It's
get
a little
buried.
annual tradition.
Yeah.
And I definitely think there's a future episode for sand lizards that we'll have to line up, because how many people associate reptiles with the UK, and certainly think they definitely need that attention too. So we'll have to organise a future episode on sand lizards.
How many people walking over the dunes know they're walking next to sand lizards? That's the thing, isn't it? So,
Yeah. It'll be, they could be right next to you and you wouldn't know it, and quick enough.
No, they're incredibly
gone in a
difficult to
flash.
spot. Yeah.
Buried themselves. So yeah, really cool. In terms of surveying the large heath butterflies that have returned, is it as easy as going out there and counting and knowing kind of year on year that the numbers are going up, or because they can delay their pupating, right, depending on the conditions? So how accurate of a picture is it to get?
So you're never going to get a 100% accurate count of exactly how many butterflies are in the area. But again, what you do is you go out and it's basically mapped out into transects. So you walk up and down your transects and you count the number of butterflies that you see. And that number will give you an idea of how many are in the overall population. The other thing is as well, like, we know the area that the butterflies are in, but also we survey around that area to see whether they're beginning to move, because obviously that's another really good indicator that the population is growing, the population is healthy, so it's needing to move out a little bit. And yeah, it's a hard job. Butterfly surveying. It sounds like it shouldn't be, but the terrain is quite tough. It's wet, it's boggy. You're definitely going to fall in a ditch at some point. You're clambering over bits of heather, but it is actually a really lovely thing to do, because you are just there and you're out in this habitat that there isn't public access to it, because, as Alan mentioned before, it wouldn't be safe. People would end up in ditches and horrible things. But you get this real privilege to be out there on site, and you get to count beautiful little butterflies.
I spent 20 years of my life living next door to the mosses. When we moved from Wigan to Salford, and we were living literally next to the mosses we're now working on. And it was a no-go area. It was an agricultural area. It was an industrial area. People would chase you off. It was a no-go area. I just feel privileged now that I'm actually going back to these areas where I used to live. As I say, for 20 years, I probably went on the moss 3 times, and now I can actually go there and actually appreciate that this is right next door to where I used to live and the things we used to do. So yeah, it is. We are opening footpaths. We are allowing people to kind of wander in and see some of the work we're doing. Obviously, as I mentioned before, we don't want people wandering onto the boat, but we'll certainly create spaces for them to actually enjoy the fact that they're sitting in a wilderness 200 yards away from one of the busiest little villages on the edge of Manchester and Liverpool. So it is quite an experience actually going down there. And certainly as we get to spring and summer and the butterflies and the dragonflies and the birds start to appear, and if you're lucky you'll meet Dave Steele, who's the birding legend from down there, and Dave will tell you some of the 80 different species he's spotted that particular month. It's a real wilderness. It is a wilderness. And again, I remember a news crew coming with us from an agricultural site onto Astley Moss. Nothing wrong with the agricultural site. It's a good field. It's where the farmer's making his money. But as we actually got through the bushes and up the bunding onto the moss, he said it was like walking into Narnia. and it's that feeling that you're actually sitting somewhere special. And for millions of people who live around Manchester, Liverpool, Warrington, Wigan, it's on the doorsteps. It's literally on the doorsteps. And it's the importance of it is he's now got this designation as a national nature reserve, which proves it's being recognised that all the work that's been there, not just by the Wildlife Trust, but by the many councils that work down there and other organisations, and all the volunteers and local people. It just proves just how important it is, not just to people, but to wildlife.
Yeah, it's definitely worth mentioning as well that the Large Heath Butterfly Reintroduction Project wasn't just us. It's not just the Wildlife Trust. It's the partnership project across loads of different partners and organisations. Actually, too many to mention here, but it's all part of the Great Manchester Wetlands Partnership. And it's only by all these different organisations coming together and working together that we were able to bring that butterfly back.
We did have a few grumpy meetings, don't worry.
Oh, that was. But that's part of making sure that it's right. You can't just wake up one morning and be like, oh, I'm going to shift some butterfly. We've got to make sure that we do it right, and that's where
it was years in the planning. It was years in the planning, but I can't believe it's nearly 6 years since the first release.
I know,
and like I say, it's that kind of, I guess, for you guys, that sense of satisfaction that it was across all of those organisations that involved very much a northwestern effort, and it is brought in that sense of community. And on the back of the sense of community, obviously we've mentioned that some of the actions that everyone can get involved, if people feel empowered, they could apply to be a peatland project volunteer. But some of the other ways that they can get involved could be becoming a member of the Wildlife Trust, and that or donating, and that funding is actually part of that would be going towards buying up other land that could potentially be used for similar projects in the future.
Yeah, so basically, without our members and our supporters, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be able to do any of the work that we are able to do. We wouldn't be able to buy spades. We wouldn't be able to, get wellies for our volunteers, things like that. So supporting Lancashire Wildlife Trust is a really amazing thing that anyone can do if they're able to and obviously want to. And it really does make a huge difference. And not just to peatlands specifically, but we've got wonderful projects, planting Christmas trees to make sand dunes, looking after Formby's population of red squirrels. There's just amazing work happening right across the region. Another thing that we're always looking to do, as you say, is to acquire more land, so that we can start either bringing it back into nature's recovery, managing it in different ways, creating more nature reserves to help reverse some of these declines that we're seeing, both locally and nationally.
I think if you kind of look at the question you were asking before is how do we know if the population is doing well on Astley Moss? If we could buy a couple of areas of mossland, which there's always possibilities of buying these areas. If we could buy a couple of areas of peatland in between Astley and Little Walden, and then we could naturally watch as the butterflies move across from one peatland to the next, and kind of spread the wings as we do.
Yeah. We were really lucky last year. We got some funding from Veolia, big sort of Lambshill people, to buy a field that directly borders onto Astley Moss and literally right next to where the Large Heath Butterfly population is. Currently, that's a drained agricultural field, but we will shortly be starting work to restore that. So bring those water tables back up, start returning all of those missing plant species that we need there. So sphagnum mosses, cotton grasses, heathers, cross-leaved heath, things like that. And then once that habitat is sort of back up, then that's going to be more space for that population of large heath butterfly to grow and to, so we've got even more butterflies. And again, it's not just providing that home for wildlife, it's reducing those carbon emissions, it's helping to reduce flooding, it's providing green space. Hopefully one day, we'd love to get kind of footpaths running through there so people can visit. So it's all of these things that are really important, and there are loads of ways, as you say, that people can support. You can volunteer with us, you can support us, you can become a member, you can help to share what we're doing. That's one of the most important things people can do, actually, is just, share our social media posts, tell people what we're doing. When we are looking at policy, we're looking at lobbying, help support that, tell people about it. It's just about, getting involved, and there are loads of different ways. And yeah, we love talking to people about it.
I think for me though, I mean, it is about supporting the wildlife trust and it is about supporting conservation organisations, but it's more than that. I think it's as we found during the lockdown, people seem to appreciate nature, and people should appreciate nature. There's nothing better. The sun's coming out now. I just want to go outside. I am lucky that I've witnessed a lot of really, really fantastic wildlife phenomena over the past 10, 15 years. But that's not just because I'm working for the Wildlife Trust. That's because I go for a walk with a dog. That's because I'm fortunate to live on the edge of the West Pennine Moors. If I walk outside of my house, I can be on the moors in 15 minutes, and it's that getting out. It's great to watch spectacular wildlife programs on TV, but they're happening on your doorstep. When we had the snow, I had a pied wagtail in my garden. It's nothing that special, but I've never had one in my garden in 20 years. I've had sparrowhawks in the garden. It's a tiny little garden. And again, it's just basically a case of sitting out in your garden, making sure the birds are fed, making sure your garden's wildlife friendly. So it's more than joining organisations. I think we need people to get involved in nature first. We need 1 in 4 people to get involved in nature to help us to reverse this this crisis, this biodiversity crisis that we're getting across the world, where species are going extinct. We've returned one species back to an area where it's been missing for 150 years. But there's a lot of work to do. And the only way we can do that is for people to actually get out of the houses or just look in the gardens, look out your window at your bird table and just appreciate just how much benefit we get from nature and from natural things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Alan. And you mentioned it earlier as well about what people can do in their gardens. And I remember when I first started zookeeping, one of the Biaza campaigns was Grab That Gap, and it was about utilising little spaces in your garden to put insect-friendly plants or bug hotels, all things of that nature. But something else that you guys have alluded to on your website in terms of helping this specific project is using peat-free soil. And again, I'll link the peat-free soil guide that you've provided. But we're actually seeing a lot of positive support from large-scale companies on that front, aren't we?
Yeah, so what a lot of people might not realise is that when you go and buy your bag of compost from the garden centre to fill up a nice pot in your garden, for a long time, and unfortunately still, that could be made of peat. And the way that happens is basically a beautiful peatland is taken, the water is drained out of it, the vegetation is stripped off the top, and big diggers come in and they literally dig the peat out of the ground. This is what happened to our little Walden Moss Nature Reserve. It was all bar completely destroyed for peat extraction. This is ridiculous. We do not need to use peat to grow plants. Up until the 1950s, we kind of didn't. And then basically the only reason it got used is because it's cheap. It is cheap to destroy a peatland. That's sort of it. Yeah, peat holds water really well, but so do lots of other things. So we've been campaigning for 30 years to try and stop the use of peat in horticulture. Under the last government, a ban was actually promised. We're going to ban the use of peat in horticulture by 2024. That didn't happen. Obviously now we've got the new government coming in. We've still not seen that ban, and we really need that. But what we have noticed is that there's been a bit of a shift in consumers. So people understand this issue more, and they don't want to buy a bag of compost with peat in it. They don't want to buy a plant that's been grown in peat, because they know how damaging this is to our environment. And actually, a lot of those big retailers, well, yeah, legally they may still be allowed to create compost and grow stuff with peat in, are realizing that their consumers don't want that. The people that are buying their product don't want that. And so they are moving much more towards peat-free compost and growing media, which is amazing. It is so great. And I've seen a real shift in that even in the past kind of 5 years. But it doesn't mean that our job is over. We still all need to be really aware of what we're buying. Mm-hmm. So if you're buying a bag of compost, make sure it says peat-free. It'll be splashed all over it. You won't be able to miss it. Make sure you're buying peat-free compost. But also think about places where that peat could be hidden. So potted plants, when you're buying, a plant, it might be something wonderful, really pollinator friendly, but if it's been grown in peat, it's actually probably doing more harm than good. So check the labels of these plants. And if it doesn't say on that label, go and ask. Mm-hmm. Go and ask the person in the garden centre, say, hi, has this been grown in peat? And the more you ask, the more those retailers are going to realise, oh yeah, no, people don't want this. Also things like your little pots of herbs, growing herbs that you buy in the supermarket. Have they been grown in peat? Have they not? Quite a lot of them haven't now, which is brilliant. But we need clear labelling to be able to see so that people can make that informed decision. Mushrooms, a lot of mushrooms are grown in peat. Again, there is now beginning to get a movement toward growing them peat-free, but we need that labelling so that, when I'm stood in the shop and I want to buy some mushrooms, I love a mushroom, I want to know whether it's been grown in peat or not. And so
if anybody wants evidence, just come around to my garden in summer, and it's beautiful, completely peat-free, absolutely full of colour, full of bees and butterflies and birds.
Yeah, we don't need it.
We don't.
So why are we doing it? So supporting peat-free campaigns is another thing that everyone can do. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference. One of the really wonderful things that happened before the announcement of the peat ban that never was a public consultation that the government launched, and 95% of respondents to that consultation were in support of a peat ban. Like 95%, that's huge. And yeah, really kind of life affirming, really cheered us all up.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it does, again, a recurring theme I've seen since doing this is that by choosing where you're getting your wallet out has a massive impact and or can have the opposite effect. But by just popping it out there and planting that seed in people's minds that actually spending smart can lend a great deal to conservation, and that is something that everyone can do.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not hard, as Alan says, like my garden's peat free, his garden's peat free, and they're beautiful. It's not like you have to give something up.
I think the beauty side of it is, I think they're alive. I mean, that's the thing. I couldn't imagine going out onto into the garden and not hearing the bees buzzing, as I couldn't imagine going onto the moors and not hearing skylarks. So it's so many senses that we're being paid back for by actually thinking a little bit about what we're doing for nature.
Yeah, that's a really lovely part to almost round out the episode. And I think we're just going to finish up with some quick fire questions, some fun, light-hearted questions, just to learn a bit more about what makes the two of you tick. So are there any dream species that you'd love to see in the wild, either in the UK or overseas?
Well, they're already in the UK, but beavers. I want beavers back in Lancashire.
Yeah, I mean, beavers is going to be an obsession of ours for some time yet, until we actually get them. I mean, the thing is with beavers is we are going to probably get them coming back into Lancashire anyway, but we'd like to be involved in a reintroduction if we can. So yeah. Beavers,
I'd explode.
Solid effort and uniform answers. I love that. How about places that you would love to visit?
Oh, globally, I've always wanted to go to Japan. That's it for me. I want to go up into the mountains, and I want to go somewhere that's really different. I love the UK, and I get to go to some really special, amazing places. But always wanted to go.
I mean, I'm just going to go. I'm going to return to somewhere I've been before, but I like going to the Northumberland coast, and I like to go to stand in spring in the middle of the Tern colony at Templeton. It's just the most amazing place in the world, especially on a really nice sunny day.
Oh yeah, can I go there too?
Yeah, we can go anywhere. We can go everywhere. Yeah, no, both fantastic. And I think there is a certain ode to put in the spotlight on how beautiful the UK's wild spaces are and can be. And I think hopefully a lot of people got that appreciation a bit more during the pandemic, as and when they could go out.
I think just visiting places. I've got friends who live in Colchester, and I'd never been down to Essex before, and I had no idea Essex was such a beautiful county. And there are so many. I mean, the Essex Wildlife Trust are amazing, and visiting their reserves was just an absolute pleasure.
Alan mentioned that you can't imagine going out to the moors and not hearing a skylark. Do you have any particular sounds that are made by animals that are your absolute favourite?
I love birdsong. I like any birdsong. I mean, so even though the skylark is something that I genuinely love, I think my favourite sound. I'm a punk rocker, by the way, but my favourite music in the world is the blackbird every morning. And if I didn't have a blackbird waking up every morning.
You two are so in sync.
I love
blackbirds are amazing.
I love their kind of angry sounding chatter. They come out and shout at me while I'm topping up the bird table. Like, get me everything now.
I've got one that literally sits 3 feet behind me when I'm loading up the bird feeders, just waiting to be fed. But we've always had blackbirds. We've had native blackbirds and migrants in the garden this year, so that was quite exciting. And obviously we'll go back to having the native ones. They'll start singing soon, and they'll be singing during the mating season. And the dawn chorus as I mentioned to you before, Johnny. We've had a dog, but he died in April, so we're going to get a puppy next week. So as from a couple of weeks after we get him, I'll be taking in the dawn chorus with the dog in the morning, listening to the different bird song and trying to identify it. And it is such a pleasure to walk in Lancashire, in spring and summer.
And I feel like I might know your answer to this one, Jenny, but you might also come way off field and surprise me. But do you have a favourite animal habitat?
Yeah, it's peatlands. They're just brilliant. They're so beautiful. They're You get these amazing kind of big skies. And what I really love about peatlands actually is how they kind of open up in front of you as soon as you look down. Like when I'm on a peatland, I fall over all the time because I'm never looking forwards and always looking down at my feet. And there is absolute magic down there. Sphagnum mosses, the keystone species of a peatland, you might think moss. How exciting can moss be? These things are beautiful. You get different species in different colours. You get these like ruby reds, golden yellows, deep kind of emerald greens. It's like a jewel box around your feet. You get carnivorous plants, carnivorous sundews, with bright red little things, and they're tiny, but they're also fierce and they're going to eat midges and they're amazing. And yeah, when the cotton grass seed heads are out, it's all sprinkled in a dusting of icing sugar, and they are absolutely beautiful. And I think sometimes people forget about them a little bit, and that sort of makes me love them even more.
Both of you done very well, certainly advocating for, and rightly so, advocating for an environment and a habitat that A, needs it, but B, even if it didn't need it, probably would still get overlooked.
Yeah, they're a wonderful thing. But then also, yeah, you go to the coast and you're like, well, our marine environment's spectacular. I remember letting out an almighty shriek a while ago, and people came running thinking I'd hurt myself. And it was just because I'd seen quite a big prawn in a rock pool.
That's incredible. How about you, Alan?
I love the beach. I love St Anne's. I love standing. I particularly love St Anne's when it's stormy and the wind's blowing and you can see the oyster catchers scuttling along the beach and watch the gulls flying ahead and overhead. And yeah, I just think again it's one of those. We've got so many places like the moors, like the peatlands, like the coast, like the woods, where you can just go and lose yourself and actually just spend a couple of minutes just kind of being amongst nature and just enjoying it and just really enjoying it. But yeah, when it's wild, it's there's something really special. And we obviously the way things are going heading towards summer again. I think we're going to have another wild summer with winds and rains and stuff like that. But it shouldn't put people off. We've got companies who are making thousands of pounds creating puffer jackets out of bulrushes. So let's get out. We need to get out into the weather as well and just kind of appreciate everything that's going on. I always say, wildlife. Certainly the wildlife on my bird table isn't put off by any kind of weather. Why should we be?
Fantastic. Well, a couple more questions. After a day of fighting extinction, how do the two of you relax?
I love to read. Yeah, I'm currently having a great time reading lots of books about the St Kilda Islands, which I'm currently rather fascinated by. Amazing bird life up there as well.
Fantastic. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be interested to know what bird life is around. There's certainly a huge focus on birding at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think birds are, well, they're fantastic and they're all around us all the time. From, your common blackbirds and robins and blue tits that we all see on our bird tables. They're beautiful, but then we also have amazing rarities. But I think, yeah, everyone loves birds. They're cute, aren't they?
Yeah.
I will be at the moment. I'm kind of preparing for the next couple of weeks when I've got a couple of festivals coming up, because we've got the Manchester Punk Festival and then which is basically indoors, but then I've got Strummer Camp in May where I'll be camping out in the wild, watching the spiders at the top of my tent, looking at it's a beautiful venue. Oldham Rugby Club is an absolutely beautiful venue, surrounded by flowers and birdsong. So it's a really great way to spend the morning before the music starts. But I just find it's at the moment I'm kind of speaking to my friends who I'm going to be meeting there and all this kind of thing, and they're always interested in what I've been doing during the day and kind of how they can get involved in stuff. I actually managed to get one of the punks to come along and volunteer for us in Manchester as well, and he's been doing it now for the last 5 years. So I think there's a kind of a common bond between punk rock and nature.
Oh, that's incredible. Lastly then, do you have any final messages for our listeners or any fellow wildlife avengers out there?
I think the most important thing anyone can do actually is just care. Like, if you care, then you will naturally take steps that will be really positive and will help. And yeah, care about our world, appreciate it, and then good things will follow.
Yeah, in a similar way, I think for me, I think we could all take an action for nature pretty much every day, no matter how small, even if it's just putting bird food out, even if it's just putting water, if it's creating a wild garden or doing more by volunteering or something like that. But if everybody in the UK took an action for nature, we wouldn't have a biodiversity crisis, and we will continue for generations to come to be surrounded by astonishing wildlife and astonishing wildlife spectacles.
Fantastic. That's a great point to finish up on. So Alan and Jenny, thank you so much for teaming up with me. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and it's been a really fun conversation. I've had a great time listening and talking to you about all of it. So we wish you both continued success going forward. Obviously, like I said, I'll provide links to the website for all of those important documents and resources. And hopefully we'll team up again to talk about sand lizards in the near future.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really, really fun.
It's been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Yeah.
And of course, a huge shout out to you, my fellow wildlife avengers, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this volume of the podcast and wish to join the fight, please follow, subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you stream from. Please also follow on social media to stay up to date with the podcast's latest developments and share with your family and friends to help stack the odds in conservation's favour. Be sure to check out the links in the show notes for some amazing resources and opportunities if you feel empowered by this episode. Don't forget you can join the fight by joining the conversation. Share your thoughts and suggestions on the episodes via email or social media. In the spirit of restoring a widespread disconnect to nature globally, I want to hear from you. If you've happened to snap pictures or videos of native species, subjective to where you're listening from of course, underrepresented species or generally just underappreciated yet beautiful wild spaces, then I want to see them. If you have any questions about any of the topics in this episode, or you've had an experience with nature, a different species, or just some thoughts about wildlife, then please send in any photos, videos, voice notes or questions by email. Be sure to tune in to the next fantastic episode of the Conservationists Assemble. Until then, this is Captain Conservation signing off.